everyone. Our esteemed chief guest, Lautiji, uh, esteemed speakers, my friends from the industry, media, and the entire audience, ladies and gentlemen, it's such a pleasure and honor to be here. But while I was hearing other speakers, I think it started with some storytelling, and I was like taken down memory lane where I heard some childhood stories, and then I heard talks about how growing up thinking about future. And I said, let me take a step back. This is something which I did as well. I used to love, watching science fiction, reading about science fiction. And I don't know when the world changed and the science fiction actually became reality. There was a time when we actually thought it will probably become reality. And that time wasn't really long back, maybe till about a few years ago. When ChatGPT came last year, I think even till about 6 months prior, we knew something like this will happen. Will happen so soon, we had not imagined. Then came text to video, Soros. Wow. I would have never imagined. And being in a tech industry, I would have thought this will happen, but not so soon. There are things that are happening today that are unprecedented. Probably I was also trying to recall a Darwin quote which we used to use very often, that it is not the strongest, nor the most intelligent, but the most adaptive to change that will survive. I guess Darwin really didn't know what change was all about, because the amount of change that we are seeing now is absolutely unprecedented, as I said. And before I move to the topic which I'm going to be talking about, which is the adaptive network, which is very well aligned to what adaptation to change means, I was also thinking, how am I adapting personally? As leaders, we keep talking about learning and unlearning and relearning. I think this had a totally different connotation over the last few years. Personally, not till very long back, I used to be telling my kids about technology. I used to be very proud about telling them about what's happening around technology. I think the world has changed. Today, they tell me about technology. They are my teachers. Today, I learn more from my daughters than I teach them now. This is the power of change. But with every change comes complication. Fortunately, to every complication, there is a solution. But as I said, the complications today are too many. Look at the advent of AI, right? And it was just in 2021 or 2022 when everybody thought AI is going to be boring, too complex. It's going to happen, but too far away. Suddenly, everything changed in 2023. We were at a conference in Hawaii at Pacific Telecom, and we were talking about the growth of data centers. Today, thanks to the network explosion, data centers in this country specifically are going to be more than doubling every year for the next 5 to 6 years. Now, this maths was probably done before the advent of ChatGPT. And now I think there'll be even more data. Add to it the complexity of the video. My dear friends, we are looking at a data explosion. And the AI is not just specific to any one industry. You see the industries all across, all of them. Today, 85% of the top enterprises across the globe have either an AI strategy or are already adopting AI in some form or shape. What to talk about industry? I think a lot of people sitting here would be using ChatGPT already. If not you, your kids would definitely be using ChatGPT, right? The change is, as I said, is unprecedented. And what does it do? What does it do for the network? The data might be the fuel. The applications and the use cases might be the vehicles. But end of the day, they have to apply on that network. And that network today is getting super stressed. And that network needs to be scalable, but how? How do you keep building more and more networks overnight? You heard from Matthew how critical fiber is, right? It's not easy to lay fiber overnight and say, I'll have more and more and more fiber. You have to get more out of it. And that's where the challenge lies. Again, till not so long back when we started talking about the cloud era coming, right? Everybody's moving to the cloud. Fortunately, today, I think anything and everything is on the cloud. This was a major disruption, and this wasn't long back. Till about 1 year ago, when I used to make my presentations, I used to talk about this as the big disruption, the cloud. Today, it has become even more complex. Besides the cloud, now we have, thanks to AI, something called the edge cloud, which is taking off. And when we spoke about 5G use cases, we said the edge is coming. The use cases are going to drive. But this time, I think the AI is going to be a significant trigger. And why AI would be such a big trigger? Because the amount of data that AI is generating and the processing that is required, if it is not done at the edge, it is going to be phenomenally expensive. Today, all of this data needs to be treated extremely fast on a low latency networks and pretty much real time. And that is why the advent of the edge cloud. But when you start, and then again, as if that wasn't enough, there is yet another disruption, which is a dynamic cloud, which is more apps driven. Now, all of these need to coexist. If they need to coexist, there needs to be a framework. And that framework is what we call as the adaptive network. In the coming slides, I'll tell you a little more about the adaptive network. But right now, let me just talk about what this adaptive network should be. It needs to be agile. It needs to be self-optimizing. It needs to be self-configurable. It needs to be dynamic. It needs to be scalable. It needs to be so many things in one package that can only address these trends that we're talking about. But fortunately, as I said, we do have a solution. Yeah. Now let's look at the challenges on the network. We just spoke about how it is getting stressed thanks to the enormous amount of data, which is relentless. There was a Gartner study which said only 1% of the internet is thanks to AI. And probably another year and a half, it is going to become 11%. And when that study came out, they were only talking about generative AI in terms of ChatGPT. They had probably not thought of video. Now let's do the maths and just assume where this is going to go. Now, and when you have to configure something like this, and I spoke about the edge. Now the edge today is not a single vendor or a single person doing that. The edge is going to become an ecosystem. There is no single vendor who can probably address this complexity alone. And that is why the openness of the network is absolutely critical. I heard Matthew also spoke about how the openness is important, open APIs, they're very critical. Gone is the world where people used to think that they can build something which is very captive, which is not going to open out, and they want to close the doors and keep that technology with themselves. It's an era of collaboration where multiple vendors need to come together as an ecosystem and drive a transformation. All the digital transformation that we're talking about, what's going to happen in the world or what's going to happen in our own country, I think it will require an ecosystem. And the foundation, the platform of that is the word adaptive. Look at the challenges. There is AI ML coming from one end. On the other hand, if you look at on the right-hand side, today you have to do more for less. It's not that for a service provider, CapEx budgets are just going on and on and on increasing. It's not happening. It's not going to happen. Their ARPUs are not increasing at the same pace. Obviously, the good part today is they are increasing, unlike a few years ago. But still, there is a challenge. And then there are these legacy systems which are still coexisting, which need to be transformed. And on top of it, I think which is very important for all of us, we need to be sustainable. We have to do it for our world, for our earth. That was another topic somebody mentioned. Sustainability is the key. And that starts with all the products that you deploy in your environment. They need to be energy efficient. They need to take less space. So all of this needs to come together to form the adaptive network, or what leads to the evolution of the network. I said when I started Darwin's quote, not the strongest, not the most intelligent, but the most adaptive to change. But fortunately, I can say the adaptive network that we're talking about is not only the strongest, it is also the most intelligent, it is also the most adaptive to change. Let's talk about strength. We've launched the world's first 1.6 terabits wavelength platform. 1.6 terabits. We were fortunately the first to launch the first 400 gig. We were the first to launch 800 gig. And now we are the first to launch 1.6 tera. This is amazing. The kind of speeds and feeds that we're talking about, this is a solution. But this alone is not a solution. The speed alone is not the sense. As I said, sustainability is the key. You can see what we did in a footprint of 6.54 tera. Today we are able to deliver 12.8 tera. What does this mean? That means you're using 50% of the space. And you're also using only half the power, because you're using 50% of the power per bit. This is amazing. This is mind-blowing. In my view, I think this will change so many other things. A lot of drivers that we're talking about 5G. So you mentioned so many use cases. But where is the bottleneck? The bottleneck becomes the network, because you need the speeds and feeds. We were at Pacific Telecom in Hawaii, and this is the first time I heard the hyperscalers talk about this. Because every time you heard the hyperscalers talk, they used to say, you know what, we need low cost for the space and power at a very affordable cost. The network was always an afterthought. But today, they say network cannot be an afterthought. Because you might have the lowest cost to build a data center, build the most fantastic data center, have the least amount of power, but if you don't have the network to scale, your data center is not going to be good enough, right? As I said, what is adaptive? Adaptive is something which self-configures, self-optimizes, self-heals, and helps you deliver real-time productivity. Self-healing, secure, these are very, very important requirements for these solutions. Because what AI is going to be driving, and I'm going to come to a use case in a bit, is also some incredible use cases, but if they are not on a layer of security or a layer of a secure framework, that will become extremely challenging. Sorry, just building it out. So what's the framework for an adaptive network? I've been talking about adaptive throughout my slides. Maybe you guys must be wondering why adaptive. The adaptive framework is basically, it has 4 pillars. The first pillar is about connect, what we call as the programmable infrastructure, right? This is all about the optics, the routing and switching, but yet, most important criteria for this is it has to be open. It has to be programmable. And on top of it, we need to have a layer of analytics and intelligence, what we call as sense. Most important, because if you don't have the right analytics, if you don't have the right intelligence, your network will not be adaptive, right? And this is where our solutions have AI ML embedded in it. And the third big part of that is ACT, which is the software control layer on top, which is automating this entire process. Very critical. But none of this would be good enough till we have the 4th pillar, which is about professional services. Because there will still be a human touch, as we see, where we'll have specialized people, but working with automated and more futuristic tools to help solve this entire puzzle of delivering an open, scalable, secure, and sustainable adaptive network. I know I'm at the top of the hour, but I'll quickly take one simple use case, right? Let's talk about healthcare, because a lot of people spoke about healthcare and we heard about how diagnosis is going to change. There's a very interesting Harvard study which says in India, there are just about 20,000 radiologists, right? And if we see the global standards, pretty much a radiologist per 100,000 lose match, but that is way below the world standards. There are about 5.2 million medical errors when it comes to diagnosis. Do we have a solution for that today? Fortunately, yes. And the solution lies in AI. Because the AI can ensure that what a radiologist does, they can probably do it better. They can help minimize some of these errors, save lives. Now, suddenly, it has got a totally new meaning because the network today is going to support that, is going to support lives. That is why the network needs to be absolutely low latency, has to be fast, reliable, secure. Look at what will happen. It seems very simplistic, right? You're going to just connect the dots and maybe connect a hospital images to a doctor. Looks simplistic, but when you put it in the AI framework, there are millions of images which will be transformed into an AI algorithm. Millions, right? Which are going to be transferred from a core platform to the healthcare service providers. That is where what you need to build is a very robust network, which is not only secure, as I said, has to be scalable, has to optimize itself. Because today, when we say dynamic, why do we say dynamic is because you cannot even predict the volume of data that is going to happen. And that is why sometimes I take a step back and I say today being a CTO of a service provider is not easy. Or a CIO of an enterprise is also not easy. Now, how do you build your network to scale? Because you have no idea how much demands are going to come on the network. It is the most challenging task for a CTO and a CIO. And that is where you need a network which can not only scale, but also helps you be secure and sustainable. With that, I know the time's up, so I'll skip this and I go on to my last slide. And just wrap it up. So as I said, what we believe is a network needs to be sustainable, needs to be smarter, needs to be responsive. And that, my dear friends, is the adaptive network. Thank you so much.